The air in the arboretum tasted of rich, dark soil and the sweet, heavy perfume of the lunar orchid, a flower engineered to bloom only in the twilight hours. Gabe ran a thumb over a velvety petal, his mind a quiet catalog of chlorophyll densities and nutrient absorption rates. Here, under the terraformed sky of Viridian, he was a master of a small, peaceful universe. Generations of his family had cultivated this land, turning it from a barren rock into a testament to patience. 1,000 years of peace had taught humanity many things, but the greatest of these was how to grow. He heard it first as a subtle vibration through the soles of his boots, a deep, resonant hum that did not belong to the colony's quiet machinery. He looked up from the orchid, his brow furrowed. The hum grew, resolving into a low, guttural roar that seemed to press down from above, compressing the air. The engineered sky, a placid blue just moments before, began to ripple. Then the world tore open. A ship, vast and brutal in its design, descended through a shimmering tear in the atmospheric projection. It was the color of a fresh bruise, all sharp angles and menacing, unfamiliar geometry. Panic, a feeling so alien it was almost academic, seized the colonists in the central plaza. Screams replaced the gentle murmur of conversation. More ships followed, a fleet of them, blotting out the artificial sun. Hatches hissed open, disgorging armored figures that moved with a predatory grace. They were Xylos. Gabe had only ever seen them in historical data slates, tall, exoskeletal beings with 4 arms and heads that swiveled with insectoid speed. They carried weapons that spat bolts of incandescent energy, not to kill but to incapacitate. The bolts struck colonists who convulsed and fell, paralyzed by a glowing neural net. Gabe's instincts, buried under a lifetime of peace, clawed their way to the surface. He shoved 2 of his younger apprentices toward the reinforced root cellar beneath the arboretum. "Go," he commanded, his voice tight. "Bar the door, do not open it." He grabbed a long-handled cultivator, its 3 steel tines sharpened for aerating compacted soil. It was a pathetic weapon, but it was all he had. He watched as the Xylos soldiers ignored the structures, their movements brutally efficient as they herded the paralyzed colonists toward the waiting ships. This wasn't an invasion. It was a harvest. A Xylos soldier turned toward him, its multifaceted eyes fixing on his movement. It raised its rifle. Gabe didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, not with the grace of a trained fighter, but with the explosive desperation of a cornered animal. He drove the cultivator's tines into the gap between the alien's chest plate and its shoulder joint. The creature shrieked, a high-pitched chittering sound, as black ichor sprayed from the wound. For a moment he felt a spark of savage satisfaction. It was short-lived. A second soldier slammed the butt of its rifle into the side of his head. The world exploded in a flash of white, and the taste of soil was replaced by the coppery tang of his own blood. He collapsed, his consciousness fraying. The last thing he saw was a massive metal boot descending toward his face. He awoke to silence and the smell of ozone. The Xylos were gone. So were hundreds of his people. He staggered to his feet, his head throbbing, and looked upon the wreckage of his home. It was then that the device on his wrist, a simple silver band he'd been required to wear since birth, came to life. It had never done anything before, not once in his 30 years. Now it glowed with a cold, insistent blue light, projecting a single, stark symbol into the air before him, the stylized shield of the Aegis Protocol. The ship that came for him did not land. It simply materialized in the sky above the arboretum, a blade of obsidian blackness against the flickering, damaged projection of the sky. It made no sound. A column of shimmering light descended, and a calm, disembodied voice spoke in his ear, seeming to come from the band on his wrist. "Gabriel, step into the beam. We are extracting you." There was no room for argument. Gabe complied, his body still aching from the fight. The light enveloped him, and the ruined colony of Viridian vanished. He found himself standing on the polished deck of a ship's hangar, the air crisp and sterile. Men and women in severe, dark gray uniforms moved with quiet purpose, their faces grim. This was a place that had never known peace. He was escorted to a command deck, a vast circular room where one wall was a window into the abyss. Outside, nestled within the dense clutter of the asteroid belt, floated a station of impossible size, its surface bristling with weapon emplacements and sensor arrays. This was Aegis Command. A man stood before the window, his back to Gabe. He was tall and lean, his uniform adorned with the insignia of a fleet admiral. He turned, his face a mask of controlled intensity. This was the admiral. "Gabriel," the admiral said, his voice the same one from the beam. It held no warmth, only a profound weariness. "I am sorry for what you have endured. Viridian was a tragedy." "They took everyone," Gabe said, his voice raw. "They just took them." "We know," the admiral replied, gesturing to a massive holographic display that dominated the center of the room. An image of a Xylos battlecruiser appeared. "The Imperium has grown arrogant. They see us as gardeners and poets. They believe our 1,000-year silence was the result of weakness." The display shifted, showing a star system swarming with Xylos ships. Then, from points of brilliant light, human vessels appeared. They were smaller than the Xylos cruisers, wedge-shaped and menacingly sleek. They moved with a fluid, predatory grace that the lumbering alien ships could not match. "They are mistaken," the admiral said, a flicker of cold fire in his eyes. "The Aegis Protocol was established 900 years ago, not a declaration of war, but a promise of response. We did not build bigger ships, we built smarter ones. We did not train more soldiers, we trained better ones." On the display, the battle unfolded. The human ships didn't engage in broadsides. They executed pinpoint FTL jumps, appearing behind the Xylos command ships to unleash devastating volleys at their engines. Swarms of tiny autonomous drones, too numerous to target, descended upon the larger vessels, tearing away armor plating and disabling weapon systems. It was not a battle, it was a dissection. "The Xylos prefect on that command ship has just sent a frantic message to his superiors," the admiral continued, his voice low. "He is reporting tactics he cannot comprehend. He is reporting losses he believed were impossible. That is the first part of our message to them." Gabe watched, mesmerized by the cold, brutal efficiency of it all. This was the other side of humanity, the one hidden beneath a millennium of art and philosophy. "Why am I here?" Gabe asked, finally tearing his eyes from the slaughter. "I'm a botanist." "Precisely," the admiral said, turning his full attention to Gabe. "The fleet can deliver the message in space, but the Xylos have taken our people. To get them back, we need to send a second message, one delivered to their doorstep. And for that, we need a specialist. We need someone who understands how things grow, and, if necessary, how to make them stop." Spectre unit was comprised of the three people who now sat across from Gabe in the sterile briefing room. Their leader, a man with gray-streaked hair and eyes that had seen too much, was introduced only as the unit leader. He assessed Gabe with a look of profound skepticism. The woman to his left, her fingers dancing over a datapad, was their comms specialist. The comms specialist. Her expression was one of detached curiosity. The man lounging in his chair with an easy confidence was the pilot, and he offered Gabe a lazy, mocking salute. "A botanist," the unit leader stated, his voice a low gravel. "The admiral has a strange sense of humor." "My background is in xenoecology and terraforming," Gabe countered, keeping his voice steady. "I understand how alien ecosystems function on a molecular level." "That's fascinating," the pilot drawled. "Can you make a flower grow out of a Xylos's head? Because that's the only use I can see for you." "Enough," the unit leader snapped, silencing the pilot with a glare. He fixed his gaze on Gabe. "Our job is unconventional warfare. We go where the fleet can't. We break things they can't reach. Our last specialist was an expert in demolitions. You have very large shoes to fill." Their test came 2 days later. The objective was a Xylos long-range sensor array on Tyrannus 3, a desolate moon with a corrosive atmosphere. The array was preventing the Aegis Fleet from making a surprise jump into the system. The unit's plan was simple and brutal: a low-altitude approach followed by a direct assault to plant explosive charges. Estimated casualties, acceptable. Gabe, studying the sensor data provided by the comms specialist, saw a different path. "The array's power conduits are made from a refined beryllium alloy," he said, pointing to a schematic on the central display, "and the atmospheric scans show high concentrations of a metallurgic fungus, Aspergillus chalybs. It's dormant in the moon's thin atmosphere." The unit leader raised an eyebrow. "And if you aerosolize a catalytic agent, something high in phosphates, into the atmosphere near the array, the fungus will activate. Its metabolic process rapidly corrodes beryllium. The conduits will dissolve in minutes. No explosion, no firefight. The array just goes dark. The pilot snorted. You want to go out there and puff some space fertilizer at them? Gabe met his gaze. It's more efficient. The unit leader was silent for a long moment, studying Gabe. Finally, he nodded slowly. All right, botanist, we'll try it your way. They loaded a canister of the phosphate agent onto a drone. The pilot flew their stealth ship, the Phantom, into the upper atmosphere of Tyrannus III, his usual bravado replaced by a tense focus. He released the drone, which descended into the sickly yellow clouds and dispersed its payload. They waited. For 10 minutes, nothing happened. The pilot was about to make a sarcastic comment when the comm specialist suddenly sat bolt upright. Sir, she said, her voice laced with disbelief, the array is offline. All power readings are flatlining. They're dark, completely dark. In the quiet of the cockpit, the unit leader turned his head and looked at Gabe. The skepticism was gone from his eyes, replaced by a glimmer of something else. Respect. Welcome to Spectre Unit, Botanist, he said. The victory at Tyrannus III sent a ripple through Aegis Command. Spectre Unit's unconventional success became a model, and the data was disseminated to other special operations teams. For Gabe, the quiet approval of his unit was more significant than any official commendation. He had found a place in this new, violent world, not by learning to destroy, but by applying his knowledge of how to create, or in this case, deconstruct. Their primary mission came down from the Admiral himself. Intelligence had pinpointed the central command and control hub for the entire Xylos sector fleet. It was the nerve center, the brain that coordinated their every move. Crippling it would be a more decisive blow than destroying a dozen battlecruisers. The problem, the comm specialist explained, pointing to a star chart, is that it isn't where it should be. It's not on the Xylos homeworld or their primary military fortress. All our intel points here. Her finger tapped on a small, unremarkable moon orbiting the gas giant Xylos Prime. Its designation was Chthon. It's a restricted military zone, the unit leader added, crossing his arms. Completely locked down. Their fleet patrols it constantly. Whatever is on that moon, it's the most important thing they have. The Phantom was designed for this. It was a ghost, its hull coated in sensor-absorbent panels, its engines running on a contained gravity drive that was nearly undetectable. The pilot navigated them through the outer patrol rings with a surgeon's precision, his knuckles white on the controls. They slipped past lumbering cruisers and agile fighters, a shadow moving through a field of predators. Landing on Chthon was like setting foot in a mausoleum. The atmosphere was thin but breathable, yet the silence was absolute. There were no animals, no insects, no wind. The landscape was a stark alien canvas of black, volcanic rock and fields of bizarre, engineered flora. Towering, crystalline structures that resembled trees hummed with a low-energy field. Thick, glowing cables like the roots of some immense technological plant snaked across the ground, disappearing into the rock. "This isn't natural," Gabe murmured, kneeling to examine one of the glowing roots. It pulsed with a soft, rhythmic light, like a slow heartbeat. "This entire ecosystem, it's been manufactured." "It's a machine," the comm specialist said, her voice hushed as she read the data from her wrist-mounted scanner. "The whole moon, the plants, the soil, it's all part of a single integrated system. The energy readings are off the charts." They followed the largest of the root-like conduits, which led them to the base of a massive, flat-topped mesa that dominated the horizon. The conduit plunged directly into the sheer rock face through a perfectly circular tunnel. There were no guards, no visible defenses. There was only the humming silence and the unsettling, rhythmic glow. "They don't need guards," the unit leader said, his hand resting on the grip of his pulse rifle. "They're so confident in their security that they don't think anyone could ever get this far." He gestured with his rifle. "Let's prove them wrong." They entered the tunnel, their helmet lights cutting through the oppressive darkness. The air grew warmer, thick with the smell of ozone and something else, something organic and faintly sweet. The low hum intensified, becoming a deep, visceral thrum that vibrated in their bones. The tunnel opened into a cavern of unimaginable scale, and what they saw there stole the breath from their lungs. The cavern was filled with light, a soft, pulsating bioluminescence that emanated from the chamber's center. There, suspended by a web of the same glowing conduits they had seen on the surface, was a brain. It was a living, biological brain the size of a mountain, its sulci and gyri canyons and ridges of living tissue. It was the most monstrous and awe-inspiring thing Gabe had ever seen. The entire moon, the engineered flora, the conduits, it was all a life support system for this single, colossal organism. "By all the stars," the pilot whispered, his usual arrogance completely gone. "This is their command hub," the comms specialist breathed, her scanner working furiously. "The processing power, it's astronomical. No wonder their fleet coordination is so perfect. They aren't using silicon chips, they're using this." As their eyes adjusted, they saw the true horror. Deep within the translucent outer layers of the brain, nestled like seeds in a piece of fruit, were thousands of smaller lights. The unit leader zoomed in with his helmet's optical sensor, projecting the image for the rest of the team to see. Each light was a pod, and inside each pod was a human. They were suspended in a clear amniotic fluid, their bodies limp. Wires thin as hair snaked from their skulls, connecting them directly to the monstrous brain. Their faces were placid, their eyes closed, but they were alive. Gabe recognized the face of Alara, the woman who ran the bakery in Viridian's Central Plaza. He saw the colony's chief administrator, his old friend Ben. They were all there. The abducted colonists from Viridian, and likely thousands more from other earlier raids. "What is this?" Gabe asked, his voice a choked whisper. The comm specialist's face was pale. "It's a distributed computing network. They're not using the humans for labor, they're using their brains. The Xylos are powerful, but their individual intelligence is limited, rigid. They lack creativity, intuition, so they steal ours." She swallowed hard. "They've harvested our minds to serve as living processors for their war machine." The term hung in the air, sickening and absolute. A neural harvest. Humanity's greatest asset, its adaptability, its ingenuity, had been turned into a weapon to be used against it. Every brilliant tactical decision the Aegis Fleet had fought against, every unpredictable maneuver, had been powered by the stolen minds of their own people. The unit leader's face was set like stone. He unslung a heavy pack from his back, a high-yield plasma charge. "Our mission is to destroy this hub," he said, his voice cold and devoid of emotion. "We plant the charge at the primary neural nexus. The blast will cascade through the entire system." Gabe stared at him, horrified. "Destroy it? That will kill them all. That's Ben Alara. Those are our people." "They are casualties of war," the unit leader said, his voice unyielding. He wouldn't meet Gabe's eyes. "There is no other way. This is the target. We have our orders." He began to prime the charge, the quiet clicks of the detonator echoing in the vast, silent chamber. Each click was a death sentence for 1,000 captive souls. "No." The word was quiet, but it cut through the cavern's hum with the force of a physical blow. The unit leader stopped, his hand hovering over the charge's activation panel. He turned slowly to face Gabe. "What did you say, botanist?" "I said no," Gabe repeated, stepping between the soldier and the central mass of the brain. He planted his feet, his body a fragile shield before the monstrous altar. "We are not murdering thousands of our own people. There has to be another way." "There is no other way," the unit leader growled, his patience gone. "This thing is the heart of their fleet. Cripple it and we save billions. The math is simple and it is brutal. Now get out of my way." "No," Gabe said again, his jaw tight. "You brought me on this team because I see things differently, so let me see. Let me think." He turned his back on the soldier's fury, forcing himself to look at the horrifying spectacle before him. He pushed past the faces of his friends, past the image of their violation, and focused on the system itself. It was an ecosystem. A parasitic one, but an ecosystem nonetheless. The brain was the predator, the humans the prey. The wires were the teeth, the conduits the digestive tract. And every ecosystem, no matter how alien, had rules. It had dependencies. It had weaknesses. "Comms," Gabe said, his voice urgent. "The comm specialist, I need everything you have on this thing's biology. Schematics, energy flow, nutrient composition, anything." The comm specialist, who had been watching the standoff with wide eyes, immediately bent to her work. "I'm hacking a diagnostic terminal now. It's old, sloppy encryption. I'm in. Data scrolled across Gabe's helmet display. He absorbed it instantly, his mind racing, cross-referencing the alien biology with 1,000 different terrestrial and xenobiological models from his own memory. He saw the nutrient feeds, the waste reclamation cycles, the synaptic interfaces, and then he saw it. A single protein chain, designated by the Xylos as interface conductor K7. It's a neural bridge, Gabe murmured, thinking aloud. It's what allows the host brain to access the processing power of the human minds without causing a catastrophic biological rejection. It translates the thought processes. So what? The pilot asked from the tunnel entrance where he stood guard. So it's a single point of failure, Gabe said, a wild spark of hope igniting in his chest. If we could introduce an agent, a targeted inhibitor that would neutralize only that specific protein, it wouldn't kill the host brain, it wouldn't kill the captives, it would just sever the connection, it would unplug them. The unit leader stared at him. You want to perform brain surgery on a monster the size of a city with a chemical we don't have? We can make it, Gabe insisted, pointing at the schematics. The base molecules are all present in the flora here on Cathon. The Xylos engineered this ecosystem to support the hub. They inadvertently created the ingredients for its own destruction. I need 3 specific samples: the crystalline filaments from the sun spire plants, the neuroconductive fluid from the grave moss, and a powdered form of the igneous rock near the thermal vents. I can synthesize the inhibitor. A tense silence fell over the team. The unit leader looked from Gabe's desperate, determined face to the cold, unforgiving plasma charge in his hands. He had his orders. He had the simple, clean solution. But for the first time, he also had a choice. A 1 in a million shot, offered by a man who saw life where he only saw a target. He let out a long, slow breath and deactivated the charge. "All right, botanist," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of his decision. "Let's go to war your way." The plan was audacious and predicated on a razor's edge of hope. The unit leader, a master of tactical improvisation, laid it out with swift efficiency. "Pilot, you and I will create a diversion. We'll hit a peripheral power substation on the far side of the moon. We'll make as much noise as possible, draw their patrols away from the hub. It'll buy you time, but not much." The pilot grinned, a flash of his old bravado returning. "You want noise? I'll make this moon sing." The unit leader turned to the other two. "Comms, you're with the botanist. You're his eyes and his shield. Get him the samples he needs. We meet back at the Phantom in 2 hours. Not a second later. If you're not there, we're gone." There was no sentiment in his words, only the harsh reality of their situation. They synchronized their chronometers, and the team split. The leader and pilot disappeared back down the tunnel, their footsteps echoing. Gabe and the comm specialist were left in the humming silence of the great cavern. "All right, Gabe," she said, her voice all business as she projected a topographical map into the air between them. "The sun spires are on the high mesas to the east. The thermal vents are in the western caldera. Grave moss only grows in the deep shadows of the canyons between them. We can't do it all in one trip." "We have to," Gabe said. "The sun spires first." They moved out onto the silent surface of Thon. The world felt different now, not just alien, but hostile. They were no longer explorers, they were intruders, and the moon's immune system was beginning to take notice. As they ascended the mesas, they saw the first of the Guardians. It rose from the ground, assembling itself from the rock and metallic flora, a biomechanical sentinel, vaguely arachnoid in shape with a single glowing red optic. It moved with an unnatural, jerky speed. "Contact!" the comm specialist yelled, raising her pulse rifle. She fired a burst, the bolts of plasma splashing harmlessly against its armored carapace. Gabe, meanwhile, wasn't looking at the creature. He was looking at the ground it stood on, at the network of glowing roots beneath its feet. "Don't shoot it," he shouted. "Shoot the conduits. Cut its power." She adjusted her aim, firing a concentrated burst at the glowing cable. The root exploded in a shower of sparks and viscous fluid. The sentinel froze for a second, its red eye flickering, and then collapsed into a heap of inert components. They proceeded with this new understanding, not as soldiers fighting a monster, but as technicians disabling a machine. They reached the sun spires. towering crystalline plants that pulsed with captured solar energy. Gabe carefully harvested the delicate hair-like filaments from their core while the comms specialist stood guard. Next, they descended into the deep, shadowed canyons. The grave moss grew in thick, dark patches, feeding on geothermal radiation. As Gabe scraped the moss into a collection vial, more sentinels activated, crawling down the canyon walls. The fight was close and desperate, their plasma bolts searing the air as they systematically severed the Guardians from their power source. Finally, they raced toward the western caldera, the air growing hot and hazy with sulfur. They found the thermal vents, and Gabe gathered the fine metallic dust that coated the rocks. Their 2 hours were almost up. As they sprinted back toward the rendezvous point, the comm specialist's scanner shrieked. "They're on to us," she panted, her rifle held high. The diversion didn't hold them forever, multiple patrols converging on our position. They could see the Phantom now, its ramp down, the pilot laying down suppressing fire into the distance. The unit leader stood on the ramp, waving them on. They ran, their lungs burning as the ground behind them erupted from the plasma fire of the closing Xylos patrols. They scrambled up the ramp just as the pilot lifted the ship, banking hard into the alien sky. The inside of the Phantom was chaos. The pilot threw the ship into a series of gut-wrenching evasive maneuvers, sending them into a dive through a narrow canyon. The ship's alarms blared as Xylos fighters swarmed on their tail. "I can't shake them!" the pilot yelled, his knuckles white on the controls. "They've adapted to our flight patterns." "Just keep us alive," the unit leader grunted, bracing himself against a bulkhead. He turned to Gabe. "How long?" "I don't know," Gabe said, already moving toward the ship's small med bay. "I've never done this before." He dumped the samples onto a sterile tray. The med bay was designed for treating wounds, not for advanced biosynthesis. He had to improvise, repurposing a blood plasma separator as a centrifuge and a laser scalpel as a high-intensity heating element. The comm specialist was at his side, rerouting the ship's computer processors to help him run the complex molecular simulations. "I need to isolate the filament's core protein," Gabe muttered, his hands moving with a speed and precision he didn't know he possessed. The ship lurched violently, throwing him against the wall. He gritted his teeth and pushed himself back to the workstation. "Then I need to bond it with the conductive enzymes from the moss." Outside, the sounds of battle were a constant, terrifying drumbeat. The hiss of near misses, the percussive thud of their own cannons firing, the strained groans of the ship's hull. But inside the med bay, there was only the quiet hum of the equipment and Gabe's focused breathing. He was in his element. This was the Arboretum, but the stakes were infinitely higher. The soil was a petri dish, the seeds were alien proteins, and the flower he was trying to grow was a weapon that could save thousands. "The simulation is complete," the comm specialist announced, her voice tight with tension. "The protein bond is stable, but the required catalyst temperature is extreme. The laser scalpel is our only tool that can generate that kind of heat, but it's not designed for sustained output." "It'll have to be," Gabe said. He held the vial containing the mixture under the laser's beam. A thin bead of sweat trickled down his temple. He had to hold it perfectly steady. The ship bucked again, and his hand slipped. The laser grazed the side of the vial, superheating the glass. "It's going to breach," the comm specialist warned. Gabe didn't flinch. He adjusted his grip, his fingers burning from the heat, and held the vial in the beam. He watched the fluid inside begin to change, shifting from a murky brown to a clear, vibrant blue. It was working. "They're boxing us in," the pilot shouted from the cockpit. "I'm out of tricks." "Bring us around," the unit leader commanded, his voice grim. He grabbed his pulse rifle. "We're going to make our own trick." The ship leveled out. Gabe finished the synthesis, drawing the glowing blue liquid into a high-pressure injector. He had one dose, one shot to get it right. He looked up at the unit leader. "It's ready." The leader nodded once. "Then let's go finish this." The rear ramp of the Phantom lowered, revealing the black, star-dusted sky and the swarm of Xylos fighters closing in behind them. The wind shrieked as it tore through the open hangar. The unit leader and the pilot stood on the ramp, their rifles barking, laying down a wall of suppressing fire against the pursuing Xylos ships. Their shots were precise, targeting the enemy fighters' weapon pods and maneuvering thrusters, disabling rather than destroying. "We can't hold them for long," the pilot yelled over the roar of the engines. "Whatever you're going to do, do it now." The Phantom swooped low over the moon's surface, heading directly back toward the CNC hub. "Comms, defend the entrance," the unit leader ordered. "Gabe, you're with me. We clear a path. You administer the dose. No matter what happens, you do not stop. Understood?" Gabe nodded, clutching the injector. His heart hammered against his ribs. He was a botanist. He was about to run into a battle behind a man who was a living weapon to inject a fluid of his own creation into the brain of a god monster. The absurdity of it was almost enough to make him laugh. The ship touched down just outside the tunnel entrance. The four of them sprinted out, the ramp sealing behind them. Elite Xylos guards, clad in heavier armor than the regular soldiers, were already converging on their position, alerted by the Phantom's return. The comm specialist took a position behind a rock outcropping, her rifle spitting plasma with methodical accuracy. "Go! I'll hold this position!" Gabe and the unit leader plunged back into the tunnel. The guards inside were ready for them. The corridor erupted in a crossfire of plasma bolts. The unit leader moved with an economy of motion that was terrifying to behold. He didn't waste a single step or a single shot. He was a force of nature, a whirlwind of controlled violence that carved a path through the enemy ranks. Gabe followed in his wake, feeling like a child trailing a tidal wave. He kept his head down, the injector held tight against his chest. They burst into the main cavern. The great brain pulsed before them, immense and indifferent. More guards were positioned around the primary nutrient conduit, the injection point Gabe had identified. "This is as far as I can take you," the unit leader yelled, taking cover behind a pillar of rock and laying down a field of fire. "Go now." Gabe ran. He sprinted across the open floor of the cavern, the air alive with the hiss of plasma bolts flying past his head. He ignored the shouts, the explosions, the chaos. His entire world narrowed to a single point, the access valve on the nutrient conduit. He reached it, fumbling for a moment with the injector. A Xylos guard lunged at him, its energy blade humming. A plasma bolt from the unit leader's rifle struck it square in the chest, and it fell. Gabe slammed the injector against the valve and pushed the plunger. The glowing blue fluid shot into the conduit, disappearing into the vast circulatory system of the biocomputer. For a moment, nothing happened. The fighting continued. Gabe's heart sank. Had he failed? Was his science flawed? Then a low hum began to build, rising in pitch until it was a piercing whine that vibrated through the entire cavern. The soft, rhythmic light of the great brain began to flicker erratically. On the thousands of pods suspended within its mass, the malevolent red glow of the neural interface wavered. One by one, then in a cascading wave, the lights shifted from red to a placid, neutral blue. A collective psychic scream echoed in the chamber, not of sound, but of pure, raw mental feedback. It was the shriek of 1,000 minds being ripped away from 1,000,000,000 connections. Simultaneously, across the entire sector, the Xylos fleet went blind, deaf, and dumb. Battle cruisers drifted aimlessly, their commands severed. Fighters flew in circles, their pilots receiving no orders. The perfect, seamless coordination that had made them so formidable was gone, replaced by a profound and total silence. In the cavern, the remaining Xylos guards froze, their connection to the central command lost. They stood for a moment in confusion before the unit leader and the comm specialist who had fought her way to the entrance, cut them down. Silence fell. The great brain still pulsed, but it was alone now. The human minds were free. The message had been delivered. The retreat was a blur. Spectre unit, battered but intact, herded the recovered unconscious human captives onto the Phantom and lifted off from the silent moon of Cathon. The Aegis Fleet, seizing the advantage against the now chaotic Xylos forces, swept through the system, achieving a victory so total and decisive it would be studied in military academies for centuries. The final scene of the war was not a battle, but a surrender. The Xylos Imperium, its command structure shattered and its fleets in disarray, sued for peace. The terms were unconditional. Gabe stood on the hangar deck of the Aegis flagship, the Indomitable. The vast space was a makeshift triage center. Medics moved among the rows of cots where the rescued colonists lay, slowly waking from their long nightmare. He saw Alara the baker and Ben the administrator, their faces pale but their minds their own again. The Admiral walked over to him, his stride measured, his face showing the first hint of relief Gabe had ever seen on it. "They have accepted our terms," the Admiral said, his voice quiet. "The war is over. Humanity is safe. What your team accomplished, what you accomplished, will be the stuff of legends." Gabe didn't look at him. He looked at his own hands. They were the hands of a botanist. They knew the delicate art of grafting a scion, of nurturing a seedling, of coaxing life from barren soil. Now they also knew the art of brewing a weapon that could cripple an empire. He had not taken a single life in the CNC hub, yet he had dealt a blow more devastating than any bomb. "We sent them a message," Gabe said, his voice hollow. "Yes," the Admiral affirmed. "We told the galaxy that we are not to be trifled with." "No," Gabe corrected him, finally turning to meet the Admiral's gaze. His eyes held a new, ancient weariness. "We told them that our ingenuity is as boundless as our capacity for peace. We told them that if they come for our people, we will turn their own biology against them. We will find the single protein that holds their empire together, and we will dissolve it. We sent a message not just in blood, but in chemistry." He looked back at the recovering colonists, at the price of their victory. He had saved them, but he had unleashed something in the process. He had shown the galaxy that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't its ships or its soldiers, but the terrifying, adaptable power of the human mind itself. Earth's long, quiet peace was over, bought and paid for with a knowledge that could never again be unlearned. The gardener now knew how to cultivate poisons, and the galaxy would never look at a human the same way again. The war was over, but the echoes of Chthon reverberated through the vast silence of space, a discordant symphony that Gabe couldn't shake. He watched from the observation deck of the Indomitable as transports, laden with the recovering colonists, disembarked for various rehabilitation centers across the sector. Alara and Ben had smiled at him, weak but genuine, their eyes holding a distant, haunted quality that mirrored his own. They were free, yes, but the experience had indelibly altered them. He understood that. He was altered too. The Admiral, now hailed as a reluctant hero, had offered him a permanent position at Aegis Command, a scientific advisory role that would allow him to continue his research, to delve deeper into xenobiology for strategic applications. It was a position of immense power and influence, a chance to shape humanity's future. But the image of the great, pulsing brain, teeming with stolen human minds, flashed in his memory, a silent indictment. He had freed them, but at what cost to himself? He politely declined. His hands, still smelling faintly of the alien flora from Chthon, felt too much like tools of war now, not instruments of growth. He needed to find the gardener again. The Phantom sat in a secluded hangar bay, its dark hull a familiar, comforting presence. The pilot, leaning against a bulkhead, polished a well-worn data slate. The comm specialist, immersed in a holographic interface, tapped away with a serene focus. The unit leader, however, was gone. He had taken a leave of absence, citing a need to recalibrate his moral compass. Gabe understood. The choices made on Chthon had weighed heavily on them all. "So, botanist," the pilot said, looking up from his data slate, "heard you turned down the big chair. What's the plan?" Gabe ran a hand over the Phantom's sleek, cold surface. "I'm going to Viridian." The pilot raised an eyebrow. "Going back to Garden, after all that?" "Especially after all that," Gabe affirmed. "Someone has to rebuild, and I know the soil there better than anyone." The comms specialist looked up, a rare smile gracing her lips. "I'll upload all the latest atmospheric and geological survey data for you. The terraforming systems are still mostly intact, but they'll need careful rebalancing." "And I," the pilot announced, pushing off the bulkhead, "will require payment for my services." "Payment?" Gabe asked, genuinely surprised. "I assumed you'd want a new assignment, something thrilling." "Nah," the pilot scoffed. "Too much excitement lately. Besides, I heard Viridian's got some excellent vintage nutrient paste, and I've always wanted to see a lunar orchid in full bloom." The comms specialist chuckled, a soft melodic sound. "I suppose a change of pace wouldn't hurt, and honestly, the silence of space has become a bit loud." Gabe looked between them, a warmth spreading through him. He hadn't realized how deeply these hardened individuals had come to care, not just for the mission, but for him, the naive botanist who had stumbled into their world. Unit leader would say this is highly irregular, Gabe said, a wry smile touching his lips. He'd also say we earned a little irregularity, the pilot countered. Besides, someone has to make sure you don't accidentally grow a sentient fungus that tries to take over the quadrant. And so Spectre unit, fractured but not broken, took to the stars once more, not on a mission of destruction, but of quiet, painstaking rebirth. The Phantom, the ghost ship, became a vessel of healing. Viridian was a scar. The Arboretum, once a vibrant tapestry of life, was a ruin. The terraformed sky flickered, unable to maintain its placid blue. Buildings were torn open, their interiors exposed to the harsh vacuum that occasionally bled through the atmospheric breaches. But amidst the wreckage, a tenacious green still clung to life. A few lunar orchids, somehow spared the Xylos' indifferent brutality, had unfurled their heavy, fragrant petals in the twilight. Gabe knelt among the debris, his hands sifting through the dark soil. He felt the pain of the land, the echoes of the screams, the emptiness where vibrant life once thrummed. But he also felt the resilience. The roots, deep and interconnected, held the promise of renewal. The first few weeks were a blur of backbreaking labor. The comms specialist, surprisingly adept with heavy machinery, helped recalibrate the atmospheric processors, patching the shimmering tears in the sky. The pilot, for all his bravado, proved to be an invaluable engineer, jury-rigging damaged conduits and restoring power to the vital hydroponics systems. They worked in silence, driven by a shared, unspoken purpose. News of their efforts reached Aegis Command, and much to Gabe's surprise, Admiral the Admiral began sending supplies, advanced terraforming equipment, specialized nutrient compounds, and even a team of bioengineers to assist. It wasn't a military gesture. It was an act of profound, quiet support. Perhaps the Admiral, too, was beginning to understand the deeper message sent on Chthon. As Viridian slowly began to heal, so did Gabe. He cultivated new strains of flora, genetically engineered to thrive in the wounded soil. He patiently coaxed life back into the damaged ecosystems, nurturing each seedling as if it were a fragile promise. He worked with his hands, feeling the rich earth, smelling the nascent life, and slowly, painstakingly, he began to remember the peace that had once defined his existence. One evening, as the reconstructed artificial sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and violet, Gabe sat among the newly budding plants in the Arboretum. The air was cleaner now, the hum of the repaired machinery a gentle, reassuring thrum. The lunar orchids, sensing the coming twilight, began to unfurl their petals, their sweet perfume filling the air. The comm specialist joined him, her usual serious demeanor softened by the beauty of the moment. "It's almost like it was before," she murmured, tracing a finger over a delicate fern. "No," Gabe said, shaking his head gently. "It will never be like before. It will be something new, something stronger. We carry the scars, but we also carry the lessons." The pilot sauntered over, a contented sigh escaping him. "This nutrient paste ain't bad. Might even be better than the old stuff." He paused, looking around at the slowly rejuvenating landscape. "So, botanist, what's next? More gardening?" Gabe smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile that reached his eyes. "Always more gardening, but not just here. The galaxy is vast, and there are other worlds, other lives that need to be cultivated." The implication hung in the air. The Xylos Imperium, humbled and confined, was still a threat, but a different kind. The Aegis Protocol had delivered its brutal message, but Gabe's message was a counterpoint, a more nuanced understanding of strength. It was the knowledge that true power lay not just in destruction, but in understanding, in adaptation, in the ability to turn even the most insidious weapon into a tool for growth. Word of Viridian's revival spread. Other colony worlds, once ravaged by the Xylos, began to reach out. They sought not just protection, but guidance. They wanted to learn how to rebuild, how to heal their own wounded ecosystems, how to integrate the lessons of resilience. Gabe and his improbable team became quiet ambassadors, traveling to desolate moons and scarred planets, offering their unique blend of scientific expertise and pragmatic hope. He taught them about soil remediation, about xenobotanical integration, about sustainable terraforming. But more than that, he taught them about the interconnectedness of all things, about the delicate balance of life, and about the inherent strength found in collaboration rather than conquest. He showed them that humanity's true ingenuity lay not in its ability to destroy, but in its boundless capacity to create, to adapt, to find new ways to thrive. The Aegis Protocol remained a vigilant shield against external threats. But a new understanding began to take root within humanity itself. The peace of 1,000 years had been a foundation, a period of quiet growth. The war had been a brutal pruning, a violent lesson in the harsh realities of the galaxy. But now a new era was dawning, one where the sharpness of Aegis was tempered by the wisdom of the botanist. Gabe still carried the ghost of Cathon. He still woke some nights with the silent scream of 1,000 minds in his ears. But during the day, under the nurturing glow of newly repaired suns, he worked. He planted seeds. He nurtured saplings. He cultivated life. And in every thriving plant, in every rebalanced ecosystem, he found a quiet, resolute answer to the darkness. The galaxy would indeed never look at humanity the same way again. They had seen its fury, its cold, calculating efficiency. But now they would also see its gardens. They would see its capacity for healing, its relentless pursuit of life, and its profound, terrifying ability to turn the very building blocks of existence into the ultimate expression of its will. The gardener had indeed learned to cultivate poisons, but he had also learned to cultivate hope. And that, Gabe knew, was the most powerful weapon of all. The long, quiet peace was over, replaced by a nuanced, vibrant, and infinitely more resilient existence.